Changing the struts on a Chevy HHR is actually a very simple process and you don't need a lot of complicated tools. On this car I've opted to do a quick strut, which is a complete assembly ready to bolt in the car. This is the first time I've used a quick strut. Typically I just buy the bare strut and I swap over my spring and mount and everything else. If you go that route, then you're going to need a spring compressor. This is a set of tools. They basically clamp onto the springs, and when you tighten those nuts, they compress the spring. You take out the nut on the top and it all comes apart. Swap it over. But I bought this car new. It's got 60,000 miles on it. So I decided to spend about $100 each and get quick struts with lifetime warranties. That way the next time they fail, I can just go get brand new ones, swap them out really easy. It'll have new mounts and everything. To do this job, the only things you really need are a breaker bar, an 18mm socket, and a 13mm wrench, a hammer, and a jack. Other things that can make your job a lot easier are a pry bar, a wire brush, some penetrating oil, a punch, and an impact wrench. These are not necessary. They will make life a little easier though. Also, an additional jack, again, not necessary, but it does help a little bit. The very first thing we're going to do is under the hood, in this corner, we're going to take out the three 13mm bolts that hold the top of the strut. Go ahead and jack up the car and remove the wheel. Mine used a 19mm socket for the lug nuts. I suggest that the first thing you do is you take a wire brush and you clean the dirt off of the threads of this nut. And these two nuts down here. And go ahead and hit them with some penetrating oil. This will help them come off so that they won't be so dry. Go ahead and let that sit for a few minutes. The nuts we're going to be removing are your sway bar link here and the two that hold your strut to this knuckle. This is where your optional second jack comes in. One thing that I find convenient is to have this jack here to support your hub assembly. So that when you disconnect your sway bar link, your strut doesn't fall down. This is where it's handy to have a pry bar. You can knock that out, but you might damage the threads. So I put a pry bar down underneath the control arm and above the sway bar and pry down, and you'll see it straightens that out and you can push it through. The next thing we need to do is remove your two bolts that connect your strut to your knuckle. One is right here and one is about 2 inches below. They're both the same size. They're 18mm, just like this one up here. Go ahead and pull off your bracket. It's holding your lines, and just let it hang. The nuts that we just took off, we're threading them back on just to protect the ends of the bolt threads. These bolts have little teeth in them that keep them from rotating inside of the knuckle. That means they're going to need a little bit of persuasion to knock them out. We put the nuts back on the end to protect the threads. You can hit them with a hammer. You might mess up the nut. You'll probably be okay. You can also put a punch or something on the end of the bolt and hit it to knock it out. Or if you want to get fancy, you can check out my friend Redneck Computer Geek's channel. He makes lead hammers. Lead is nice and soft and heavy. It can knock that out without damaging it. Since most people don't have lead hammers, again, you can just hit that with a hammer. This nut is here to protect the threads. If you mess up the nut, you'll have to buy another nut. Or you can use a punch. Put it right on the middle of the bolt. At this point, we can remove the nut. At this point, you can go ahead and completely remove the two bolts. Do the same with the bottom. At this point, everything is loose. The strut is not connected to anything. It's just kind of sitting here on the knuckle. If I lower my small jack that I placed underneath here, I can control the drop. Like that. And the strut comes out. New strut goes in, same way. Have one of the top bolts ready so that you can reach up over and put it on so it'll hang up in there. Go ahead and get it lined up. Now I'm pumping up the small jack that I put underneath here. You can just wrestle it with your hands. Now I like to just stick something in there like a screwdriver or anything that'll fit through one of the holes to help hold it together while I put in one of the bolts. Now we need to take our line holder here, put it in place. First bolt through. Thread the nut onto it. Now I can remove my temporary pin. Other bolt through. Now we're going to tighten these up, and it's going to suck this in. When it starts to slow down, I'm stopping. And I backed it off a little bit because I'm going to torque that down with a torque wrench in a few minutes. Bottom one, same deal. Now we need to put on our sway bar link. Last thing to do is make sure you have all your bolts tightened up properly. Don't forget to put your other two strut mount bolts up top inside the engine bay. I use a torque wrench. You can either go by feel and make sure they're nice and tight. You risk breaking something. Or these guys get torqued down to 15 foot-pounds. These knuckle bolts to 89 foot-pounds. And your sway bar link bolt to 48 foot-pounds. After you get everything tightened up, put the wheel on, you're ready to go.